I was lost, completely alone. The trees stretched endlessly around me, their twisted branches reaching out like claws. Every direction looked the same, dense, endless green, swallowing me whole. My breaths came short and fast, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had no idea which way to go, no food, no water, just the cold grip of fear tightening around me. My legs ached, every step feeling heavier, but stopping wasn't an option. I pushed through thick vines, my hands scratched and bleeding. Then, suddenly, I heard it. A low, deep sound, like thunder trapped inside a chest. A slow, heavy exhale that sent a chill up my spine. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears, my body refusing to move. It was close, too close. The air around me felt thicker, charged with something unseen. I turned my head, my breath caught in my throat. There, just beyond the trees, a massive shadow lurked in the dim light. I wasn't alone. My fingers clenched into fists, my mind screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. A single step forward, branches cracking under an enormous weight. My stomach twisted into knots. Then, from the shadows, it stepped into the light. A gorilla, towering, powerful. Its dark eyes locked onto mine, unreadable yet piercing, as if it could see every fear crawling beneath my skin. My entire body trembled. I could barely breathe. Was this how it ended? Right here, in the middle of nowhere? No one to hear me, no one to save me. My foot shifted backward, a twig snapping beneath me, and the gorilla tilted its head. My heart nearly stopped. It was watching me, studying me. A moment stretched into eternity. Then, without a sound, it turned. It didn't attack. It didn't charge. It simply left. I gasped for air, my body shaking. What just happened? It could have hurt me. It could have killed me. But it didn't. Why? My fingers dug into the dirt beneath me as my mind raced. This wasn't just any encounter. I thought I was just another lost traveler in the jungle. But what I didn't know was that I had just met my guardian. The jungle was endless. No paths, no signs, just an unforgiving maze of towering trees and tangled vines. Every sound sent a shiver down my spine. Distant animal cries, rustling leaves, the occasional snap of a branch. The air was thick with humidity, clinging to my skin, making every breath feel heavy. My stomach ached from hunger, my throat dry from thirst. How long had I been wandering? Hours? A day? Time didn't feel real anymore. All I knew was that I had to keep moving, even though every step felt like I was sinking deeper into a place I'd never escape. I glanced up, hoping to see some break in the trees, maybe a glimpse of the sky to guide me. But the jungle canopy stretched thick and unbroken, swallowing even the sun. My legs wobbled with exhaustion, but I forced myself forward. I needed to find water, food, shelter. But I had nothing, no supplies, no tools, just the tattered clothes on my back and the dull ache of panic pressing against my ribs. Then a sound. Low, deep, familiar. My body tensed. I turned slowly, heart pounding in my chest. There, through the thick foliage, I saw them. Eyes, watching me, the same ones from before, the gorilla. He was still here. I held my breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. Was he following me? Why? Was I walking into danger without even realizing it? My mind screamed at me to move, to run, but my body stayed frozen, locked in a silent stare with the enormous creature. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, without warning, he turned and disappeared into the trees again. A wave of confusion crashed over me. If he had wanted to attack, he would have. But he didn't. My chest tightened. Maybe I wasn't alone in this jungle after all. As night fell, the air grew colder. The once familiar sounds of the jungle turned eerie, the distant howls and rustling now feeling like whispers of unseen dangers creeping closer. I huddled beneath a tree, my arms wrapped around my knees, trying to stay warm. Sleep felt impossible. The darkness was too thick, pressing in from all sides. Every little noise made me flinch. And then, something moved nearby. My breath caught in my throat. I could barely make out the shape in the darkness, but I knew. It was him, the gorilla. He wasn't far, just sitting there, watching. Not approaching, not leaving. Just there. A strange feeling washed over me. It should have been terrifying, but for the first time since I got lost, I didn't feel completely helpless. I wasn't sure why he was still around, but somehow I knew. I wasn't entirely alone anymore. Morning came slowly, the golden light filtering through the trees, casting long shadows on the damp earth. My body ached from sleeping against the rough bark of a tree, every muscle stiff, every inch of me covered in dirt. My stomach growled loudly, a painful reminder that I hadn't eaten in what felt like forever. I needed to find food, water, something to keep me going. I pushed myself up, my legs shaky beneath me, and took a deep breath. The jungle was alive again, buzzing with the sounds of insects and distant calls of unseen creatures. I had no idea where I was going, but standing still wasn't an option. I took a step forward, then another. I forced myself to move. A sudden rustling stopped me in my tracks. My breath hitched as I turned, my heart slamming against my ribs. There, just beyond the trees, stood the gorilla. He was closer now, his massive frame partially hidden by the dense foliage. My chest tightened. He was still following me, watching me. Fear clawed at my throat. My mind screamed at me to run, to put as much distance between us as possible. But my feet wouldn't move. He wasn't charging. He wasn't baring his teeth. He was just standing there, his deep, dark eyes locked onto mine. It was as if he was waiting. But for what? I took a shaky step back, expecting him to react, to lunge, to do something. But instead, he did the opposite. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. I let out a long breath I didn't realize I had been holding. My hands trembled as I wiped the sweat from my forehead. What was happening? If he wanted to hurt me, he had every opportunity. But he didn't. He just left. Minutes passed before I finally forced myself to move again. Every sound felt louder, every movement around me more noticeable. My senses were on high alert. Then, as I stepped past a thick bush, my eyes caught something strange on the ground. A small pile of fruit. Bananas, some kind of wild berries, carefully placed on a flat rock. My stomach twisted. This wasn't natural. Someone, or something, had put them there. I swallowed hard, my gaze darting around the trees. I already knew. He was nearby, watching. I could feel it. My hands hovered over the fruit. A trick? A trap? Or a gift? I hesitated, then slowly reached down, my fingers brushing against the smooth skin of a banana. My stomach growled again, louder this time. I peeled it open, the sweet scent filling my nose, and took a bite. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. I ate quickly, my body desperate for the energy. When I finally looked up, my breath caught in my throat. There he was, standing just beyond the trees, not hiding, not threatening, just observing. A silent presence in the vastness of the jungle. A strange warmth spread through my chest. I didn't know why he was doing this. I didn't know what it meant. But for the first time since I got lost, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. The hours passed in a blur of exhaustion and uncertainty. The jungle felt less like an endless trap and more like a living, breathing thing. One that was still unpredictable, still dangerous, but no longer entirely against me. My body was weak, but the fruit had given me enough energy to move again. And as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer wandering alone. I didn't see him at first, but I knew he was there. The gorilla. Somewhere in the distance, watching. I couldn't explain how I knew. I just did. It was a strange feeling, like a presence just beyond the edge of my vision, never too close, but never too far. The thought should have terrified me, but somehow it didn't. I kept walking, trying to make sense of everything. Why was he still here? Was he following me, or was I following him? I wasn't sure anymore. My feet moved instinctively, my body drawn forward by something I didn't fully understand. Then suddenly, I stopped. Ahead of me, past a thicket of bushes, the jungle opened up into a small clearing. And there, in the middle of it, was him. He sat calmly, his massive body relaxed but alert. His deep, dark eyes met mine, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Intelligence, awareness. He wasn't just a wild animal acting on instinct. He was thinking, watching, waiting. My pulse pounded in my ears as I took a hesitant step forward. He didn't move. Another step. Still, nothing. A few days ago, I would have run in the opposite direction. But now, I wasn't so sure. A sudden rustling in the trees made me flinch. My heart leaped into my throat as I turned sharply, eyes scanning the thick jungle. Something was moving. Something fast. My breath caught. Was it another animal? Something dangerous? Panic surged through me, but before I could react, a deep rumbling sound filled the air. I turned back just in time to see him rise to his feet. His chest expanded, his massive arms flexing as he let out a low, warning growl. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard, powerful, commanding, filled with an unspoken message. A moment later, the rustling stopped. Whatever was out there had heard him, and it had left. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. He had scared it away. He had protected me. Slowly, my fingers clenched into fists. I didn't understand why. I didn't know what I had done to deserve this. But one thing was becoming clear. I wasn't just lost anymore. I was being guarded. Days passed, though I wasn't sure how many. Time in the jungle didn't feel real, just an endless cycle of light and darkness, hunger and survival. But one thing had changed. I wasn't alone. The gorilla had become more than just a shadow in the trees. He was there, always close enough for me to see, never too far. At first, I thought it was coincidence, that maybe he just happened to be near. But the more I watched him, the more I realized he was watching me too. I had no idea why. Was he curious? Protective? Did he see me as part of his world now? I didn't know, but I felt it. The way he stayed near when I searched for food, the way he looked at me, not with wild instinct, but with something deeper, something almost human. I followed him at a distance, watching the way he moved through the jungle, powerful yet silent, as if he belonged here in a way I never could. And somehow, he started teaching me without even trying. I paid attention to what he ate, which plants he avoided, how he found water by stripping bark from certain trees. I mimicked him, learning from him. The first time I tried to crack open a fruit the way he did, smashing it against a rock, I failed miserably. The tough skin barely cracked, my weak arms too small to make an impact. I let out a frustrated sigh, staring down at the unbroken fruit. Then, to my surprise, he moved closer. He reached out, effortlessly cracking it open with a single powerful motion. Then he stepped back, watching. A silent lesson. I picked up another one, took a deep breath, and tried again. This time, I hit it harder. The skin split slightly, juice trickling down the side. Not perfect, but better. I glanced up at him. He blinked once, then turned away, uninterested. But I knew. He had helped me, and that meant something. Nights were the hardest. The cold crept in, and the darkness felt like a living thing, swallowing me whole. Every rustle of leaves, every distant growl sent fear clawing up my throat. But he was there, close enough that I could hear his slow, steady breathing in the night. Once, a strange noise echoed through the trees. Something unnatural, something that didn't belong. I sat up, my heart hammering, every nerve in my body on edge. But before panic could take over, I saw him. His massive frame was already standing, eyes locked on the darkness, listening. His muscles tensed, prepared for anything. He didn't move for a long time. Then slowly, he relaxed, settling back down. The moment had passed. The jungle was safe again. And somehow, because he was there, I felt safe too. I still didn't know why he stayed. I still didn't know why he hadn't left me behind. But I knew one thing. He wasn't just a wild animal anymore. He was my guardian. The jungle had become my world. Every sound, every shadow, every breath of wind through the trees. It all felt familiar now. I still didn't know how to get out, but I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning, adapting, and I wasn't alone. The gorilla stayed near, a silent presence in the vastness of the wild. He never acted like a pet, never sought my attention, but he was there, watching, protecting, guiding me in ways I never thought possible. One morning, I woke to find him already moving through the jungle. I hesitated, then followed. He never called me to come, never waited, but I knew I was meant to. He led me through a part of the forest I hadn't seen before. Thicker, darker, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. My feet moved carefully over the uneven ground, my hands pushing aside thick vines. Then, suddenly, he stopped. I nearly ran into him. My breath caught as I peered past his massive frame. A river. My heart leapt. Clear, rushing water cutting through the jungle like a silver ribbon. My throat burned with thirst. I stumbled forward, dropping to my knees at the edge, scooping the cool water into my hands and drinking desperately. The relief was instant, washing over me like a wave. I glanced up at him, still standing there, watching. My lips parted as I realized he had brought me here. He knew I needed this. He had led me to it. For the first time, I felt something deeper than gratitude. Trust. As I drank my fill, I saw him step forward, lowering himself beside the water. He scooped some up in his massive hands, drinking calmly, as if reminding me that in this moment, we were the same. Both creatures of this jungle, both just trying to survive. A sound in the distance broke the moment. My muscles tensed, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. Something human. Voices. My heart pounded as I scrambled to my feet. I turned, searching the trees, trying to find the source. A mix of hope and fear crashed over me. Could it be rescuers? Could I finally be going home? But before I could take a step, a deep, rumbling noise filled the air. A warning. I spun back to the gorilla. He was standing now, his body tense, his dark eyes locked onto the direction of the voices. His entire posture had shifted. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was deciding. A wave of realization hit me. He didn't trust them. I swallowed hard, torn between the hope of being found and the instinct that had kept me alive this long. My mind screamed that I should run toward the voices, but my heart whispered something else. The gorilla had never been wrong before, and in that moment, I had to make a choice: trust the voices, or trust him. The voices grew louder, drifting through the trees like echoes of a world I had almost forgotten. My heart pounded. My chance, my way back home, was right there. I should have run toward them, should have screamed for help. But I didn't, because he was still there. The gorilla stood motionless, his massive body tensed, his dark eyes fixed on the unseen people beyond the trees. His expression was unreadable, but his message was clear. He didn't trust them. I hesitated, my breath shaky. Why? Why was he warning me? Weren't these the people who could save me? But something deep inside told me to listen. He had kept me alive this long, had led me to water, had protected me. He had no reason to lie. Slowly, I crouched beside him, pressing my back against the thick trunk of a tree, my pulse hammering in my ears. My instincts screamed at me to move, but I forced myself to wait, to listen. The voices weren't calling for me. They weren't shouting my name. weren't searching with urgency. They were talking, low, gruff tones, a language I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. These weren't rescuers. Through the gaps in the foliage, I finally caught a glimpse of them. 3 men, dressed in worn clothes, rifles slung over their shoulders. My breath caught. Hunters. A cold chill crawled up my spine. If I had run toward them, if I had shouted for help, would they have helped me? Or would I have just been another prize to them, a lost girl in the jungle worth more as a bargaining chip than a person? Beside me, the gorilla let out a low, almost inaudible grunt. Not a sound of fear, a sound of control. He was calm, but ready. He had seen this before. I swallowed hard, my body trembling. I understood now. This wasn't just about me. This was his world, his home, and these men, whoever they were a threat to it. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like forever. The men moved deeper into the jungle, their voices fading, their footsteps growing distant. I didn't move until I could no longer hear them. Only then did I let out the breath I had been holding. My hands shook as I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I turned to him, my guardian, my protector. He was already looking at me, his deep eyes steady, wise, knowing. He had saved me. Again. Something inside me shifted. I had spent so long thinking I was the lost one, the helpless one. But now I realized I wasn't the only one in danger. He had kept me safe. But who would keep him safe? For the first time since I had stepped into this jungle, I saw the truth. I wasn't just a stranger passing through his world. I was a part of it now, and I couldn't just leave him behind. The jungle was quiet again, but I could still feel the weight of what had just happened. My pulse was still racing, my body tense, but the danger had passed. For now, the hunters were gone. Yet, as I looked at him, standing there in the dappled sunlight, I knew they would return. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they would come back. And this time, I wouldn't be here to warn him. A deep ache settled in my chest. I had been desperate to leave, to find my way home, but now, the thought of walking away from him felt just as terrifying as the thought of never being found at all. He had protected me, fed me, led me to water. He had given me a chance to survive when I should have been nothing more than a lost cause. And now, I was about to leave him behind. Alone. Vulnerable to the dangers of men with weapons, men who saw him as nothing more than a trophy. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What could I do? I was just one person, weak, small, human. He was a king of this jungle, a creature that had survived long before I arrived and would survive long after I left. But even kings could fall. He let out a low, rumbling sound, not of fear, not of anger, but of something deeper, as if he understood, as if he knew that our time together was coming to an end. I stepped closer. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I met his gaze, searching for something, an answer, a sign, anything. And in his dark, intelligent eyes, I found it. He didn't need me to save him. He had saved himself long before I ever entered his world. But I could do something. I could make sure he wouldn't be forgotten. I took a deep breath and pressed my hand gently against the rough bark of a tree. A promise to myself, to him. If I made it out of this jungle, I wouldn't just tell my story. I would tell his. I would make sure the world knew what I had seen, what I had learned. That he wasn't just a beast, not just some wild animal to be feared or hunted. He was something more. A protector, a guardian, a friend. A sound in the distance pulled me from my thoughts. Another voice. This time it was different, clearer, familiar. My breath caught. Hope surged in my chest. Rescue had finally come. I turned back to him one last time, my heart twisting. He didn't move. He just watched me, his presence as steady as it had always been. There were no words between us, no way to explain the depth of what we had shared. But we didn't need words. We understood. Slowly, I stepped away. The trees swallowed him again, his dark shape fading into the jungle. And then, he was gone.